All right, so we are getting deep into 9/11 here, talking about the hurricane that could have potentially saved the Twin Towers, possibly for at least a few weeks, maybe indefinitely, depending. This is Hurricane Erin, which originally formed on August 30th. It was originally a tropical wave that moved off the coast of Africa. It almost immediately displayed signs of a tropical cyclone formation. On September 2nd, although Erin had a favorable upper level outflow and developing convection, on September 5th, Erin weakened to a tropical depression, and on the 6th, the system gradually produced deep convection. A surface circulation redeveloped in the northern portion of the remnants of Erin. So it seems like the storm kind of broke off from August 30th through September 5th and then re-strengthened itself. On September 5th, while around 365 miles north-northwest to where it was previously, the depression moved to the north-northeast and then turned to the north-northwest and regained tropical storm status on September 7th. Erin steadily intensified, and its convection and cloud pattern became much better organized on September 8th. On September 9th, Erin intensified into a hurricane while located 104 miles east-northeast of Bermuda, and a 40-mile wide eye developed. Erin quickly strengthened later that day to reach a peak intensity of 120 miles per hour. Shortly after reaching its peak intensity, Erin passed 105 miles east-northeast of Bermuda, its closest approach to the island. The hurricane maintained peak strength for 18 hours before it slowly weakened. Its weakened trend was slower than usual due to warmer than usual water temperatures, and by late on September 10th, Erin weakened to a Category 2 hurricane. Multiple shortwave troughs weakened the western portion of the subtropical ridge, and on September 11th, Erin turned to the east. A strengthening mid to upper level trough over eastern Canada turned the hurricane to the northeast. It gradually accelerated its forward motion, and on September 15th, after weakening to a strong tropical storm, Erin passed just east of Cape Race, Newfoundland. So that's very interesting how the hurricane turned away from New York City. If you look at its original path, it seems like it would have been headed right directly for it, but due to warmer water temperatures, it did turn away from the city. And obviously, with it being 9/11, one of the things that most people remember, zero clouds in the sky. And you can see via this aerial photo how close that cloud coverage really was to New York City. Now, had this hurricane maintained momentum right into New York, it very likely would have lost significant strength, as most hurricanes going up that far do. But it certainly would have canceled pretty much all of the flights going in and out of New York. And the timing is the most remarkable thing because it makes the turn right smack dab in the middle of this entire 9/11 timeline. It really would have affected the flights of the hijackers, and at that point we can then speculate on, would they have just rescheduled it? Would the US government have been able to figure something out? Would the Central Intelligence do something? My thought is, honestly, they probably just would have rescheduled it and done it, if I'm going to be completely honest, based on how incompetent this entire thing was. They probably could have, I mean, the U.S. government was treating these guys as just businessmen. That's pretty much it. Now, you could certainly, if you just dig in a little bit to these guys' story, it would be completely blown up. So maybe if they have to wait a few more weeks, one of them gets stopped, something happens, a tip gets thrown out there to the FBI, and it gets saved. There's always that theory, but I don't know, man. Based off of what we know, it's very possible they could have just rescheduled this on, new flights in a new morning and just done it if the hurricane would have disrupted. But there is the idea, could you imagine if a hurricane would have saved the Twin Towers, possibly for a few days or maybe indefinitely? If something were to happen, there's a lot of people involved in the hijacking. It just takes one person for the plan to be completely blown up, one wrong move. Now, when it comes to some more statistics on the hurricane, it did reach its official peak midday September 9th, so 2 days prior to September 11th. Normally, if we were to see a hurricane brush up against New York City, it would still be gaining strength on the 10th into the 11th and then possibly hit on 9/11 again, which would have canceled all of the flights and completely disrupted the 9/11 plan. Would it have turned into a 9/15, 9/16? Would we really be calling it, that type of thing? It is possible, depending on their contingency plans in terms of possibly rescheduling the flights for another day, when they would be able to do that, where they would be staying as the flights get rescheduled. All of that would have to be taken into account. You can see maximum intensity from September 1st to September 17th, which is how long the hurricane lasted for. It did reach a Category 3. There you can see the wind speed and just some other statistics on that. But to me, I just see that photo and it's like, this is such a forgotten thing when it comes to September 11th. That you look at the giant cloud wall just off the coast of New York City and how close it was to where it could have been a lot different. If that had even come closer, maybe it would have disrupted it. There would have been a lot more cloud coverage for sure. Now, it did rain on September 10th, especially the evening of September 10th, but that had nothing to do with the hurricane. You can clearly see the hurricane out significantly away in the Atlantic Ocean from where New York City was. And it always is interesting to think about, what if we didn't get the perfect weather day? I'm not even talking about raining or anything like that. I've seen questions, what if there was a thunderstorm? What if it was bad weather? Would it put out the fires? It certainly would not have put out the fires. The fire inside the Twin Towers, they were internal. So any type of rain, even if it's heavy rain, wouldn't be able to put out the fires. The only way those fires were getting put out were probably that they themselves, just going out after burning the entire upper areas of the Twin Towers above the impact zone, or you would have to internally find where the fires were, basically around 76, 77 floor, basically around the 77th, 80th floor, lug up a bunch of equipment and hoses and try and internally put the fires out, because there's no way you could put the fires out through the use of rain or by putting it into a window. It's just too high up. So in terms of like any type of weather outside of fog, I mean, certainly if it was foggy in New York City, I'm not even sure the planes would have been up. They probably would have been grounded, but I guess there is the idea, if they're taking off from Boston Logan going to San Francisco, maybe theoretically you could have some fog in New York City where the plane would still take off. Could you imagine that? Imagine there was low fog in New York City and the hijackers don't know it and they turn the plane and they just fly into straight fog. They would probably just crash into the ground somewhere. That would be crazy if that would have actually happened, but obviously it was completely clear. Hurricane Erin didn't do anything. It had 0 casualties. That's a very ironic thing. I was looking it up and it said 0 casualties, very little damage, very little wind speeds. The only top wind speed was reported in Bermuda and it was like 40 miles per hour right off the coast. And then they're like, oh yeah, don't worry, the hurricane didn't harm anyone, but it is kind of weird to where, what if it actually would have went on land, possibly could have harmed some people, but in essence saved a bunch of more people, because then 9/11 wouldn't have happened. Although you could make the argument again, based on the fact that there was really no tip. It wasn't like there was an FBI investigation into these guys, because then it would have been different. You could think if it would have delayed it by a few days, maybe they would have gotten to it. There's always the chance that maybe one of the hijackers slips up and lets the secret out, or they get detained and someone looks into their history and why did you have flight lessons and what are you doing with these men in this country. There's questions that possibly could have been asked, but we just can't speculate on whether that would have happened or not. I think it just would have been delayed and probably would have happened a week later, maybe, depending on when they could have gotten early morning flights cross country. But either way, guys, that is going to do it for this video. Make sure you follow me on X. Link to that's always in the description.